Hey there, folks, and welcome. I am Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox, coming to you not quite so live from the Torty Cabin in Shenandoah Valley to bring you episode number 30 of the weekly Ratchet. My family and I have been here playing games all weekend, but you've been waiting 2 weeks to share your thoughts on expansions to board games. So I'm going to share those comments today and so much more here on the weekly Ratchet. Hello there, folks, and welcome back to the Weekly Ratchet. As I mentioned, here at the Torty Cabin, our vacation rental here in the Shenandoah Valley. Now, we're here this weekend to kind of do some repairs, do a little bit of maintenance, and also play some games. And I have to share these photos that I took last night from here on the property. You can see the Milky Way galaxy. It was absolutely stunning last night, and I just have to share these photos. I hope you enjoy them as much as I enjoyed taking them. Other than that, we've been here, like I said, playing some games, kind of hanging out, getting a little bit of R&R following a very busy week last week coming out of the Dice Tower retreat. And of course, I did share that long recap video. I do apologize for that video being so long, but it's also the most watched episode of the Ratchet yet. So I don't know. Maybe that's what you folks really want to see. I don't know, but that was a very fun experience. I'm certainly glad to be home, but that was just a fantastic event. The retreat was everything I kind of needed it to be after everything that sort of happened last year. Anyways, I've got lots of games to talk about, lots of questions of the week to answer, and some other stuff coming up. So let me go ahead and kick things off. Going ahead and kicking off with some recently acquired games. Now, I mentioned this one in that episode last week. Actually, I kind of mentioned in the text that this came in as I was editing. This is Rock Hard 1977 by Jackie Fox, published by DeVere. I'll be talking about this game here just a little bit in this episode because we played it just yesterday. And also, if you check the comments in episode 29, it looks like Jackie Fox herself commented on episode 29, thanking me for just my impressions of this game. I don't really know if it was her, but that same account did respond to an interview that Jackie Fox did on Above Board. So I don't know, maybe I'm a little starstruck, possibly. Anyways, that was pretty cool. And this game is awesome. Rock Hard 1977. Speaking of expansions and such, I also got Tobago and the Volcano expansion. I talked about these in that kind of award ceremony recap that I did just last week, just the other day. We got to play this as well yesterday, so I'll talk about these. I also got, I didn't bring this with me, but I got a very small expansion to Moonrakers. Just a couple of cards. I believe it is the Black Matter expansion. That's one of those games where I don't really even like that game all that much, but it's because of its theme. I think I kind of keep collecting it, and I do want to try and get it played cooperatively. The latest really big box expansion added a cooperative mode. I need to try that out, but I haven't gotten to it yet. Also, I did get Through the Ages, New Story of Civilization. I mentioned, I think back in episode number 28, that I did a math trade, and someone put the wrong game into the trade. We had some kind of conversations back and forth with the organizer, and that gentleman went out and got the correct version of the game, and then I gave him back the old copy and got the new copy, and so that all panned out very well. I was very, very surprised at that outcome, and that was the right thing to do, right? So everyone kind of stepped up and made that a good experience. So I did get that game again. I didn't bring that one with me. The one that I did bring with me, the last one I'm going to share here, and this is, I feel a little sheepish on this one, all right? Because I got Twilight Inscription. This is from Fantasy Fight Games. This is a roll and write set in the Twilight Imperium universe. This is kind of this was inspired by our friend Kay, and Kay hasn't been here in the comment section for a little while. She's got a little personal thing she's dealing with. She reached out to me privately and sort of let me know what was going on. So Kay, this is for you. This is because of you. And I have played this, and I'll talk about it here in a little bit. Twilight Inscription. That is all the games for this week. So let's go ahead and kick off Question of the Week. Rolling forward with question of the week. 2 weeks ago, I asked you to share your thoughts on expansions. Do you collect expansions? Do you like expansions? What are you looking for in expansions? Maybe what some of your favorites may be. Got a lot of comments this week, so let's go ahead and kick things off. Starshocker said he'd get an expansion if it truly added twists to the game, saying, quote, an upgrade that would increase the feels. He mentioned the Lost Ruins of Arnak expansions as examples. Yep, I can understand that. We're going to see that sort of theme fairly frequently through the rest of this segment. Omar Hernandez said that he buys most expansions for games he has, seeing it as a way to add more to a game he already loves. He mentioned the Norwegians expansion for A Feast for Odin as one of his favorites. Up next is Rentless, who said he likes expansions that add something to the game without completely changing it into something else or adding too many new rules. He also said that they get bonus points if they fit seamlessly into the original box. I can certainly agree with that one. Simulation Chris said he's cooled on expansions lately, saying that they often end up making the game too complex or changing it too much. He said there are exceptions, of course, noting the Tuscany expansion for viticulture, some Terraforming Mars expansions, and a few others. Tuscany is certainly an example of what folks would call an essential expansion, an expansion that improves the game to the point that folks can't really imagine playing the base game without it. And we'll talk about that more here in a little bit. Teshera said that he and his wife are looking for very different experiences out of expansions, noting ones that add a cooperative experience to games like Solitaria for Concordia or Viticulture World. He said he heavily researches his expansions and ends up passing on most. And I thought that was an interesting comment because there are certainly some expansions that have completely changed or added new modes of play. Well, we're going to see some comments of folks who actually aren't looking for that. But I think it's really interesting to sort of look for expansions that can turn a game cooperative, that kind of turn those competitive elements into cooperative elements. And that's really neat, especially for, two-player play like that or couples play where maybe you don't want to fight against each other, but you want to still experience the game in a cooperative setting. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Thanks for that comment. Wonderflonium said expansions are a mixed bag for him, that most add too much complexity, saying that he prefers expansions that add variability without bogging the game down. Again, a comment or sort of a theme that we've seen a couple times here already. Penny5636 said she's conflicted with expansions, that she's a completionist on one hand and wants everything for a game, and sometimes gets FOMO that she'll miss out on something, even though it may end up making the game too complex. She did add that she's excited for the upcoming Clank Catacombs expansion. That is another thing that we'll kind of see here is folks who are worried that these expansions just add too much to the game, that they make it almost unwelcoming to play. Our Bulky has a new take from what we've seen so far. They said that they've lately realized it's probably better to spend the money on a new game instead of an expansion for an older game, mentioning that they've bought several villainous expansions that they've never played. This is a lesson that I certainly have not learned quite yet. Canuck Chuck said that they often feel like expansions are a cash grab unless they truly add more playability or augment the game in some fashion. And that's another sort of an interesting take, and I'll kind of mention this here in a little bit, that especially with like crowdfunding games, it's almost like the expansions are just coming out with the game, and so it's like, why aren't they just in the game already? Is this just a way to try and up the price a little bit? Good question, good comment. Tony Lawhorn confessed that he's a completionist and loves collecting expansions, though admits that most games don't get played enough to warrant getting the expansions, noting the Ark Nova expansion is an exception. Now, I haven't played that one yet myself. I need to try that one out. Tree of Life Woodworking, a first-time poster, said they love collecting expansions and getting more complexity to their games, but said that a challenge they face is when playing with new players, they'll then usually leave expansions out. The one expansion they mentioned not enjoying was the Wind Gambit expansion to Scythe. And I think that that's actually that's a comment we really haven't seen, and I don't think we'll see in the rest of this, is that, expansions are nice, but if you're always showing the game to new players, if you're going to gaming events or something like the Retreat, you may not really want to roll in the expansions because it just adds more to the teach. It adds more complexity. It's like, okay, I've taught you all this. Now I need to teach you how the expansions change everything. And so it's like if you're always sort of showing games to new players or always playing with new players, you may never really get to use your expansions anyway. So another interesting take on things. Andrew Gelling said they want expansions to open up more of the base game, adding more variability. They'd rather expansions not change the game entirely, which is why they've never played the Kegs and More expansion to Heaven and Ale, as Z Garcia of the Dice Tower mentioned in an old review that it significantly changed the game. Yep, understand that one. And it's kind of funny. That is that's a video review from Z that I actually referenced in my first ever, I think, or maybe my second Dice Tower Board Game Breakfast segment years ago. And there's kind of a funny story to that one, but I won't share it here. Derek said that FOMO has caused him to buy more expansions than he will ever play, adding that he prefers expansions that add more content versus those that add additional modes of play. Again, something that we've seen here already mentioned a couple of times. I can certainly understand. Katie of the Meeple Society said that they used to be completionists until they realized that they had many expansions which had never been played. Nowadays, they only look for expansions for games they really love, and even then, only if they expand the game without changing it completely. And again, a subject that we have seen, sort of an approach that we have seen in a couple other of these comments. And that was a pretty broad range of answers. We definitely had a lot of folks sort of thinking the same thing, that they want something that kind of adds to the game without completely changing it, but some folks saying that they want to completely change the game. Again, turning a competitive into a cooperative, for example. So it's some really unique points there, and I thought that was a pretty neat topic of conversation. I do tend to be a completionist, although I have kind of tried to break that habit in some fashion, especially if I have a game that I haven't even played yet. I try not to go adding more expansions, although that's been difficult. I have Clinic from Albin Viard, and I think 5 or 6 expansions, and I've never actually even played the base game. I've played the original Clinic, his kind of almost handmade version of it from a bunch of years ago, but I've never played the sort of deluxe edition that was kickstarted a few years back. I used to look to expansions to fix games, thinking, okay, well, I really didn't like this game, but maybe the expansion will make it better. And it usually doesn't, right? And a good example for this for me was Isle of Cats. They were coming out with the Kittens expansion, and I almost bought it. And then I kind of watched a video or watched a preview of it, and I thought, this is just more of the same. And I ended up actually getting rid of the base game instead of getting the expansion. Kind of saved myself a little bit of trouble there. I do like expansions that add variety and maybe additional actions, places to visit and worker placement games, or maybe take a small mechanism and improve it. And I think a good example of this lately has been the Dinogenics New Arrivals expansion. Now, it didn't add more places, but it did take some of the older systems and kind of added more oomph to those actions, just a little bit, gave a reason to explore some of the variability of that game. Notable favorites for me is the Valhalla expansion to Champions of Midgard, the Day Trip expansion, I think that's what it's called, to Let's Go to Japan, just add some real neat twist to that puzzle, and of course Viticulture Tuscany, as we've already talked about here. Some of those are what folks just call essential. Like, you almost have to play with those expansions to those games because it just opens up so much more and gives you, again, more reasons to do certain things. Some disappointing expansions I mentioned was Vindication. I love Vindication, and I collected everything for it, only to realize that the expansions almost distract you from the game. That if you're sitting there playing with a lot of the expansion content, you'll be watching everyone else just racking up points and progressing towards the end game, and you're kind of just playing around in the fields. So that one really kind of bummed me out. Also, Marvel Champions is a game that I've collected a ton of expansion content for, almost played none of it. A lot of the added villains and such, especially the big expansions. I'm thinking Sinister Motives, which I think is what adds the Gauntlet and Thanos, that was his name. It's so complex. There's so more additional rules. There's so much more that's added to it that I just haven't even touched it. I just haven't had the inspiration to get into it. Anyways, the next question of the week will be coming up in a few moments. Let me go ahead and get to some recently played games. And here I am already in the final chapter of the next weekly Ratchet. Some recently played games. I didn't bring all of these with me, so I'll kind of throw up some splash images of these. But last week we played 2 games of I Made You a Mixtape. This is from Dan Hughes and Mike Delisio. As I mentioned in episode 29, I believe, very briefly, that I actually have a prototype copy of this, and I will be doing a Kickstarter preview here on the channel in the next month or so. What I really thought was neat about this, it's a very, very small game. In fact, I should have tossed it in my bag and brought it with us this week because it's smaller actually in width and height than a deck of cards. It's about maybe 100 cards, so it's a little thicker. But that's all it is. It's a bunch of cards and 4 little cubes that you use to track the balance. This is an I split, you choose game, and that's not one of my favorite mechanisms. I talked a couple episodes ago about the Great Split board game, which is an okay game. I don't hate that mechanism. To me, though, it's one of those sort of drafting things, and you can very quickly get sort of overloaded by, okay, well, wait, what's this stack? And you sent me those, but have I already looked? I don't remember. Like it can get to be bogged down in some capacity. But with this one, you're only looking at 3 cards, so you're passing over a set of 1 and a set of 2. You're always playing to your left, so you don't have to worry about that. Wait, which way are we going this round? It simplifies that. But what is kind of neat is that with each of these splits that you're making, there's a lot of things you're trying to consider. You're trying to consider the balance of your cassette. You want, the same length of songs on one side as you have on the other side. You want to keep that balance right in the middle. You get the most points. You're looking at the flow, which is tracked with this little ribbon that sort of tracks across every card. You want to try and line that up with the flow of the previous song on that side of the tape. And then there's also a set collection aspect. You're just trying to get obviously the most of different sets of cards. And so with that one split, you're looking at 3 cards. You're trying to figure out how to split it. You're also trying to look at what your opponent has. Maybe you can look at, okay, well, their balance is really leaned hard to the left. Mine's leaned hard to the right. So maybe if I try and give them cards that will lean them the right way, then I know that I can probably get back what I want. And so it gives you some really interesting things to think about. You can also look at some of their sets because the colors of the cards are pretty vibrant, pretty easy to point out. And so you can kind of look from a distance. Oh, I don't want to give them that green card because they have a lot of greens already over there. I might want to try and make sure I get this back, right? Just stuff like that. My daughter has loved this game. It really surprised me. She really enjoyed the mechanism of this. We played it once, I think it was maybe Monday or Tuesday after I got back from the retreat. And the next day she goes, hey, can we play that again? We did a quick 2-player game. And the same thing too. This thing plays in 15, 20 minutes tops. Setup is 10 seconds, except that you do have to go through the deck and take out cards based on player count. That can be a little clunky. And I even talked to Mike. They're looking at ways to try and kind of speed that up a little bit, make it easier to do. Anyways, that was I Made You a Mixtape. The next day I played Grand Carnival. I mentioned in the last episode that this came in. I had played this with Daniel several months ago and really, really enjoyed it. And so I picked up a copy of it. Had a good play of this. My wife actually kicked my butt with it. There's this very, it's not really unique, but there's this idea of these public objectives that you're working towards. And when you meet them, you then kind of unlock an extra ability. But the first person who gets to it gets that bonus. And unless the other player can get to it in their next turn, they're locked out of it. And for 2 of the 3 objectives, my wife beat me to it. And it made her very flexible with the movement of her guests going through this sort of polyomino tile circus that she built. And so she was able to be a lot more flexible and pick up a lot of extra points. And I just couldn't quite get as much done. I had a pretty decent circus, but she still edged me out in points at the end of the game. But maybe even breaking a tie, if I remember. I don't think I wrote that down, but I think she actually won on a tiebreaker. I like this game. It's a sort of a 2-level polyomino, which is interesting because you start off with just these sort of sites where you need to eventually build foundation structure. You got to build walkways. You have to then set up smaller construction sites to actually place your various amusements. And so you have to get the foundation tiles first to then build the amusement tiles on top. And it just keeps things very, very interesting. So anyways, that was Grand Carnival. Up next, I'm going to talk very quickly here about Twilight Inscription. I have made no secrets whatsoever about the fact that I really just don't care for roll and write games. I find that they often are so lackluster in their appearance, usually just giving you simple check boxes to check off or squares to write numbers in. And there's certainly plenty of that here, but the whole board of this is just covered in color. And you're writing on this with these kind of dry erase markers. And it has kind of some unique ideas, I think, at least from what I've seen, in that there's a difference between an X'd out spot, a circled spot, or a circle spot with a slash. So sometimes you're getting resources that you then have to use immediately, but other times you're unlocking maybe technologies, you're unlocking benefits, maybe the ability to use some of the extra dice in this game. And then you can spend those when you're ready to. You sort of circle them to indicate that they're available to you, and then you run a single slash through them when you have used it to just keep track of the fact that it has been used. You can also, in some cases, forfeit abilities or forfeit rewards to say, okay, I'm going to X this thing out so that I can't use it, but then that gives me something else that I can do instead. And I hate to admit it, but I actually really enjoyed this. I played this here Friday evening before my family got here. I had to get here early and meet a plumber. But I ended up thinking maybe 2.5 hours into this game, still with maybe a 5-minute setup, very, very easy to set up. I did watch a couple of videos to make sure that I understood it, but it wasn't hard to learn. But it is a very, very complex game, and I won't go into I won't go into a lot of details here. But you start off each round revealing a card that is either going to tell you, you have like a special scoring, maybe something special that you do that round, and it's a very, very quick round, or it will show you some resources that you get to start off the round with, and you first have to pick one of 4 distinct boards in this game, and you decide which of those 4 boards are you going to use in that turn. You can then apply those resources to that board, and then you roll the dice and determine what else you're going to get to do on that board for that round. And just that opening decision of which of these 4 parts of this game am I going to use in this round could take me a few minutes to kind of sit there and think through. And what I enjoyed of this the most was that I had all the time in the world. I played this solo, and I had all the time in the world to think about those choices. I wasn't pressured by anyone else at the table. I could really sit and plan out, okay, well, if I use this for this, and maybe if I get that one extra resource I need, I can get this done. That could actually trigger something on a different board, and that can kind of set me up for the next big scoring opportunity to try and keep the solo player, at bay. So yeah, I like this. There are a lot of different ways that you can play it. There's I think 8 of each board in the game, so there's a lot of variety to it. I don't know that each play is going to feel drastically different from the other, and also a lot of those sort of scoring rounds, those sort of intermediate things, they happen in every game. You're always playing through the same scenarios, but they might change up just a little bit. So again, some variety to it. I don't know that I'll play this a dozen more times, but I'm definitely looking forward to my next play of Twilight Inscription. Then here at the cabin, we played this game of Tobago. I mentioned in the award ceremony, I actually forgot to mention this in episode 29. I played this with Emery Harris in the Dice Tower. It is one of his favorite games. We finally got a chance to sync up our schedules and play it, and I had a lot of fun with this. This is a sort of a treasure hunting game. You're playing cards to each color of treasure cube. There's like black, white, gray, and brown. And you're playing cards out to each of those treasures that limits the places on the map of where those treasures can be. And once you've drawn it down, once you've kind of narrowed it down to one single space on the board, there is one cube on the board indicating where that treasure is, and the first player to go and get it will then start this sort of treasure mini game where everyone who contributed to the treasure map for that treasure will get a chance to draw a treasure card, and you sort of go in order. And I won't go into a lot of detail on it, but our daughter destroyed us in this game. She had an absolute blast with this thing. She scored more points than her mother and I combined, and really had a lot of fun with it. And overall, that just made it a very good experience. I'm a little bummed. So this is a reprint. They've recently reprinted this game, and the components are not as nice as the original print. The little Jeeples, if you will, don't have any details to them. In the original version, they had like little grills and little headlights. I think maybe even little windows sort of painted onto them. And these are just generic pieces of colored wood. Also, the trees in this are just kind of a meeple of a palm tree, whereas in the original version, it was actually a 3D piece of wood. I'll see if I can find some images of them. So I'm a little bummed that this version isn't as nice as the one that I played at the Dice Tower Retreat. I'll be looking maybe for some upgrades to this, but still a game I really, really have been having fun with. Tobago. And this is by, I should read these off here real quick. This is by Bruce Allen, and I'm not sure on the publisher. It's Zoomspielen or Zockspielen. If you look on BGG, there's even a different publisher listed, but it's a German published game. A lot of fun. Tobago. Lastly, last game I played late yesterday afternoon was Rock Hard 1977. This is a worker placement game from DeVere. The designer is Jackie Fox, a former member of the Runaways, a sort of a iconic all-female rock band from back in the 70s. And I have just had a crap ton of fun playing this game. All the different comments I've seen, there's so many things I've been reading up on this game, but it's almost like the game of life. If you spun the game of life and you got the rock star, if I don't remember if that was a career choice, you could have the game of life, but if the entire game then played out with you trying to become a rock star, but you actually get to make your own decisions instead of spinning a spinner and just going around a track, that's what this is. You start off with a job, you're trying to kind of work that job to make money, but also trying to get other things done, possibly when you should be working. You're eventually going to probably end up getting fired, but hopefully by then you have built up enough of a following, you've gotten your chops up to speed, up to snuff, you've gotten enough songs learned, you've got a good reputation, you can start doing better gigs to get extra money, you don't need that dumb job anymore. You may need to, get into some candy, which helps you get extra actions, although it can go badly for you. I played this with my wife and she ended up in rehab. Sugar crashing twice. I love this game. I absolutely love this game. I love the theme of it. I love teaching it. It's just funny to teach and use phrases like, you can tell your boss to go shove it because you got a record deal to go sign. And it's so much fun to get into that role playing, even just teaching the game, that has made this so much fun. What's been interesting is I've been looking at some comments online. I've been reading some comments. I've been, sort of following some buzz about the game. And a lot of people are complaining about replayability. They're complaining about the randomness of the game, which, there's so many games that have randomness that people absolutely love. I don't get why here it's a bad thing. Like Thunder Road Vendetta is the most random, dumb, chaotic game I've ever played. Here it's just, okay, well maybe in this round the studio's closed because there was a rat problem. Or some rich people, took the stadium and so we can't perform there tonight. That's it. And it's not every round. It kind of resets from round to round. There's variability to it. And there's fairly decent numbers of cards that you can get, a lot of different things happening in each play, but I don't think it is a random chaos game, so I don't get that complaint. But other people are talking about its replayability. They feel like, well, after you've done it kind of enough times, you've seen everything, or you're just trying to become a rock star. How many times is that going to be interesting? And I get it, but I don't get it, because here's the thing. I love playing this game. I've just thoroughly enjoyed playing this game, and if you like to play a game, if it's fun to play, then it's replayable. It doesn't have to give you something different every time you play. It doesn't have to be drastically unique with every play. You don't have to see new content every single time you play it. If it's fun, it's fun. If you enjoyed it with what you played it the first time, you're probably still going to enjoy it, even if it's exactly the same the second time. You're still going to make different choices. You're still going to, draw maybe a slightly different card and see something unique. And you're still going to have fun. So I don't know. I found that to be a very interesting argument against games from the same publisher who, White Castle. I didn't see a ton of variability to White Castle. There's not a ton of variability to Three Ring Circus. There's not a ton of variability to Arc Nova, except for just getting different cards. You're doing the same thing every time. There's just going to be some slight variation. You're going to be trying to take on that puzzle from a different angle. So what's the argument there? And that's going to be my question of the week for next week, is what makes a game replayable for you? What are you looking for when you're saying, I think this game has good or bad replayability? What does that mean to you? Does it maybe mean that you really don't like the game that much and you're hoping it's going to be a little different from play to play? I don't know, but that's going to be the question for next week. And that is the end of the Weekly Ratchet. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you've all had a fantastic week of playing. I'm looking forward to another great week of games coming up, and I hope you do as well. And I will chat with you next week. Cheers. And so much more here on the Weekly Ratchet.
No, that was too weird.
What the hell is that?
Oh, no.
I said air drum, not hair drum. That's going in the outtakes.